Now, I've travelled all the way to America, to a place called Portland in the state of Maine, and I'm going to meet and interview Peter Hyat. Peter Hyat is an expert on statement analysis, and he actually gives lectures and teaches people how to analyse witness statements. And we're going to be discussing the Madeleine McCann case. Today I am joined by Peter Hyat, whose expertise is in statement analysis. Peter, can you just tell us, how did you become interested in statement analysis?
Quite a number of years ago, I was a self-described naive, very easy to deceive person. So I began reading books on statement analysis just as a hobby. Mm-hmm. But eventually, this led into an employment where I was given an initial 200 hours of training back in late 2001, I believe, in legally sound interviewing, and from there I went into more formal training, worked on cases as a state investigator for allegations of child abuse and later on allegations of adult abuse. But then I went to teaching statement analysis, and after teaching it, it was very natural that those who attended would ask for assistance. And sometimes that assistance translated into, would you do the investigation for us, especially in private companies? From there, I became more and more involved with law enforcement, in training law enforcement, assisting law enforcement. And so currently I work full-time as an analyst and an instructor, teaching law enforcement, teaching journalists, lawyers, therapists, all different professionals who study the techniques used to discern deception, but also content analysis. So it goes well beyond just saying if someone is lying or not. What are they lying about? Why are they lying? Mm-hmm. Which leads to the ultimate is when someone sends an anonymous threatening letter. Statement analysis is often able to identify who wrote this letter and what the person that wrote the letter is like. Right. This allows them to know, is this threat real? The training involves...
Well, welcome everyone, once again on a Saturday evening. So there we have Peter Hyat. We're so excited to have him. I've had so many people excited to have Peter on. And he's an expert in deception and detection. And he's actually worked with law enforcement and corporate America. And what he does is, it's basically an investigative tool with looking at lie detectors. It's an alternative to a lie detector in a sense, but Peter will explain all that much better than I can. So I just want to address a few things for this week. Now, sadly, I've only just heard of the passing of Linda Rafter, one of our members for many, many years. She's been with us for many years and was very sad to hear just a few minutes ago that she's passed away on Thursday. So rest in peace, Linda. You will be missed. You were well loved. So now the next thing is welcome to Shirley. Hi, Shirley.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Always here to help me out. Shirley, without question, is always here on a Saturday. She's there ready to show the comments. But I think, excuse me, like myself, I think you're excited to have Peter on today. It's
very much so, very much so. I rewatched a lot of those, the one that you just played. I rewatched all those again last night. So yes, I'm very excited.
Yeah, and I know a lot of the true crime community. We don't really have members on here, but the true crime community, so many people have said about how excited they are. So I'm really happy that Peter came to join us. So, and thanks.
Lizzie,
Pardon?
Lizzie,
Yeah.
I just want to say something really quick to everybody. If you guys tag me in your questions, I can find them easier. So as he's talking, if you have questions, I'm going to try to put as many up on the screen for him as possible. But just if you can just try to tag me in them, I can, when I scroll through, I can find them easier.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And please know that Peter particularly likes to get questions and answers and discusses everything, regardless, good or bad. He'd like to answer your questions. So as Shirley said, please make them known by tagging her. So before we start here, before we bring Peter on, I'm just going to play the next portion of the video from Richard D. Hall. It was such a great video. I think it's about 2.25 hours in length. He's done many mainstream, what the mainstream media basically don't tell you. And this one he dedicated to Peter and statement analysis. And Carrie is likely, I'm sure, putting the link up so everybody can go to it. And I'll tell you, I'll almost guarantee you that once you watch part of it, you're going to watch the rest. I wanted to choose a few little clips from it because I don't want to take up, Peter's here. I didn't want to take up his time using clips, but it's almost impossible. I couldn't choose. So I did finally choose a few. Just going to start the one. And this is about when Richard was asking him about deception. So this explains, this is his answer to that. And it gives you an idea. And from that, then I'll bring Peter on and you can ask him yourself. So let's just watch this for a little while and let's get started.
And I've got a list here of some areas that perhaps can indicate deception. Do you want to mention some of it, Peter, before we analyse the interview that we're going to look at?
Sure.
So hesitation?
Well, we look at a disruption. Now, some people naturally will hesitate as they speak, so we look for a pattern. If someone is suddenly hesitating, we want to know why. So we call this a sensitivity indicator, meaning, for example, if I ask you a question and you answer the question with a question, you're buying yourself some time. I know this is an important question. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're being deceptive, but you've sure caught my attention.
Right, okay. And searching for the right words?
Well, thoughtful people can do that, but when they are under certain context, like in a missing child case, we want to know what is the relationship between the missing child and the subject speaking. If it is a very close relationship, we generally don't see someone pausing or searching just for the right words. They don't care. All they care about is the missing child.
And diverting, avoiding questions?
Common form of deception.
All right. What about unnecessary expansion on certain subjects, like using woolly jargon and that kind of thing? Can that be a form of deception?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's one of the most important things we look at. When someone uses an unnecessary word, unnecessary phrase, unnecessary detail, we deem it as doubly important.
Right.
I'll give you a good example of that. When I go to the store, in order for me to go to a store, I have to leave where I am at. So someone will say, I went to the store. The pronoun I went past tense, and the store is where they went. It is very likely, statistically, to be reliable. But if someone says, I left my house and went to the store, it's unnecessary to tell us that they left the house, because you can't get to the store unless you leave. So we know something happened at the house that you're not telling me. 70% likelihood that it has to do with time or rushing or couldn't find my keys, something like that. But 30% of the time, it's critically withheld information.
Right. And what about distancing language, where you try and refer to a group rather than yourself?
Yeah, there's a couple of different forms of distancing language, and we look at distancing language and flag it as such. I went Christmas shopping with Heather. I and Heather couldn't be any further apart in the sentence than I just made it. What caused the distancing? Did we have an argument? Did I not want to go shopping? I could have said, Heather and I went Christmas shopping, but I didn't. So I went Christmas shopping with Heather puts me and Heather far apart. Sometimes the distance is nothing more than geographical. Sometimes it is strongly psychological. In cases where we expect very closeness, like if an assault case, a missing person case, an assault case is very personal. The language should reflect that. When someone has something happen to them where their body space was invaded and they were harmed, there's a hormonal response that's always going to show itself in the language. Mm-hmm. So when someone says that they were assaulted and there's distancing language, we look for deception.
Okay. And what about the use of the word would? I would have done instead of I did do.
Sure. It's one of the things that deceptive people use, and here's why. I said before that the average person has 20,000 words in their vocabulary. A more intelligent person might have 25, even 30,000 words. And when you ask them what happened, they must go into their memory, and when experiential memory speaks, it is very smooth and it goes in chronological order. A lie will disrupt that, and that causes internal stress. So people say, well, sociopaths don't feel stressed when they're lying. That's not true. They feel very stressed when they're lying because they don't want to be caught. So to disrupt that process is very stressful, and those that are really good at lying will use a substitute of words. So one of the things they'll do, instead of saying, I did not use performance-enhancing drugs, they say, I never used performance-enhancing drugs. I would never. And what they're doing is they're actually distancing themselves from an actual denial. We saw this many years ago in Lance Armstrong, where he repeatedly used the word would never or never. In all the years that I watched his interviews, all the transcripts that I've seen, not once did he say, I didn't use performance-enhancing drugs. He avoided it.
Well, that's totally fascinating stuff. And I know, seeing from the comments that I actually glanced at, I know there's so many people that want to have Peter answer some of their questions. So I'm going to bring him on now. Welcome, Peter. Thank you so much for being here. You are so enjoyed by everybody. I'm really happy that you came to join us. Did you see some of the comments in the as that was going through? There was quite a few there that hopefully we can get to as many as we can. If you've written a comment and it's ignored, by all means write it again. If you can put it to attention of Shirley, so that if you put the @ sign in front of start to write Shirley, it will give you the option of tagging her, so then she can see them easily. So that I thought I'd just play that to give you the option of not spending your time explaining all that. And also, this is mostly based on Maddie because it's a Maddie channel, and we will get to the embedded confession, which is quite extraordinary. But I'd like you to explain some of the things or answer some of the comments about what you do. And I know you do training at the FBI, right? Or you did?
No, I did some guest lectures there.
Yeah. And what else? You work with law enforcement and also corporate America, apparently, right?
Yes, most of the work is with law enforcement, and that is generally around the United States, though sometimes Western Europe or Canada. The principles of statement analysis are things that most anyone can learn. They give 6 months to a year, and we offer that training for people in law enforcement, of course, and sometimes specialties, but also for those that want nothing more than to increase their own discernment or understanding of what's going on in the world. We're living at a time where deception is, to use the word, systemic, where it is so common and propaganda is used rather than news. We may have one channel that is a cheerleader, another channel that is just sheer propaganda, and how can you tell the difference, and what happened to news stories. So there's so much that's going on in the world that people are fascinated by that. And that brings me back to the Madeleine case, where it's important for people to understand how I came to the conclusion I came to. It's important that they know the steps that went along that way. But what I've learned over the years is that there were those who were angry because they were lied to. And so when someone looks right in the camera and they're lying, there's a certain amount of contempt that they must have for the audience. You're too stupid to catch me. And so people were angry about that, and that's understandable, and that's natural. It's a natural reaction. And then there was another group that I'm not sure if they were larger or about the same size, but putting together, they're the majority, the vast majority, where they were on the fence. And they listened to the interview and they said, the McCanns did it. They're lying. Yeah. And that unfolded naturally for them. And that's the part that I think is best to try to understand. And then the third group is the smallest group. And how I label them is this way. They are willing to say for the McCanns what the McCanns themselves weren't willing to say. They use the words that the McCanns should have used. And that goes back to now how we look at how this was all done. So we start with one of their earliest interviews, and then I looked at other interviews after that, subsequent interviews, and nothing had changed even over the years. We go into it, and I say I work with a team of analysts and investigators from around the world, United States, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Greece, Russia, just going through my head, some of those at work. And many of them are bilingual or trilingual, so they're at an advantage already as they learn this. And it's very exciting to work with them. But we meet monthly, sometimes at the behest of law enforcement, sometimes on cold cases. So that when you hear me use the word we, I'm referring to the work that's common. This is, first of all, a science. It is not an exact science, but it's a science, which means this. Science thrives when it's challenged. Science thrives when it has healthy scrutiny applied to it. And that's what we want to have, is healthy scrutiny. Can you imagine if I began this saying, statement analysis is a science, but if you disagree with me on anything I say, you're suffering from mental illness. You have a type of phobia. Or worse, you're morally bankrupt. My science would mean nothing in short order, and rightfully so. I'll give you an example of that. Is I have worked the last several years on the language of addiction, where people that have an addiction will speak in certain ways that people that don't have addiction will speak. People that are in recovery will speak differently than those that are an active addiction. And this is used in employment analysis. So in our society, for most places, we can't ask a potential employee, hey, if we hire you, are you going to use cocaine at lunchtime and destroy our business? We'll have a lawsuit. So what I do is I ask them to tell me about yourself. And I get them once to talk about themselves. And as soon as they do, they'll give away their motives. If they have an illicit motive, if they're a person that sees themselves as a victim who may be very likely to fraudulently file against my company or my client's company. And if someone has an active addiction, it shows up in the language. Now, I haven't published that yet, and I've been using it for years and successfully, because my last step before I publish it and before I put it in a course is to get experienced investigators and psychologists, counselors together and have them punch as many holes through it as they can. Because what remains then will be very valuable. but it's got to stand up to scrutiny. It's got to be challenged. And then as soon as I get it all together, there'll be certain phrases that will shift with culture. I'll have to make the shift changes. So the science must stand up to scrutiny. It must be challenged. It must have disagreement. It's vital. And that leads me then to the analysis of the McCanns. A child was reported missing. And this is our presupposition. Our presupposition, ours being analysts in general, is to listen to an interview presupposing the parents are innocent, they had no involvement in it, and they're going to lead me to the truth. I'm going to trust their words. And so we have what's called the expected versus the unexpected. The expected is, what will parents say when their child is missing? So someone naturally says, wait a minute, you don't know what parents would say. It's such a unique and horrible situation that it's unpredictable. That's not true. That's what data is for, to look at not only human nature and a natural reaction, but to look at hundreds of interviews and statements made by parents of missing children, regrettably, but to listen to them, you'll see a pattern. Truthful, innocent, and I mean innocent, de facto innocence, not judicial innocence. The McCanns are judicially innocent. They haven't been convicted of this. I don't believe they're de facto innocent, however. Innocent people speak one way, people that are concealing speak another way. And then we have to ask, why are they concealing, and what are they concealing? So it begins this way, and this behavioral analysis goes right along with it. Let's say that I went to the grocery store to buy food, and I have a little shopping cart, and I go push my shopping cart, and I have my little toddler with me. And toddler is walking next to me, and as I'm putting food into the shopping cart, my toddler wanders off. What's the first thing a parent's going to do when he or she notices the child's not there? It's going to call out for the child. That's the first step, to call out for the child. But let's say I didn't call out for the child. Let's say I continued to fill my basket. And I said, I'll call out for her later. And then I got to the checkout and I paid the bill and put all the groceries in the basket. And I said, I'm going to just load my car first. So I pushed the cart to the car. I load all the groceries. I still haven't called out for the child. Then I get in the car and I drive home. And, I'm going to unload the groceries before I call out for the child or start looking for the child. So I unload the groceries and maybe I have a little bit of lunch and I take a nap. And I still haven't called out for the child. That's not the reaction of an innocent person. A natural reaction follows a pattern. And here's the pattern. When my little baby was born and she was hungry, I fed her. When she was learning to walk and she fell, I scooped her up. When she was disappointed and cried, I held her and told her everything was all right. And I've done this so many times that it's a natural reaction for me. She's in trouble, I help her. Daddy's a hero. If she goes missing, I am suddenly bereft of all autonomy, all strength, all ability to help her. That is a frustration that's going to come out in my language. And my concern is not going to be going home and taking a nap. My concern is going to be, who has her? What are they doing to her? Does she have her blankie, her teddy bear? Do you know that she doesn't eat that food? She eats this food. And this is going to play into my language one way or another. And whether I think people believe me or not, I could care less. All I care about is my missing daughter. So those are our expectations. So as we set up these natural expectations, these natural parental responses, we then listen very carefully to what they have to say, and we let their words guide us. Now, most deception, perhaps 90% or more of deception, is by missing information, withheld information. Only about 10% of the lying that takes place is done by a direct fabrication of reality. Most of it is diversion, avoidance, withholding information. And what happens is, if I've done something nefarious with my child, and I'm talking to you, or a police investigator, or media, I'm thinking about what I did and trying really hard not to say it. We had a baby go missing here locally in the state of Maine a number of years ago. And the father of whom the baby was with, a toddler, refused to cooperate with media. Initially, the police set up an opportunity for him to address the kidnapper because he was claiming kidnapping. There was no trace DNA in and out of the house, and he was claiming kidnapping. And he wouldn't. He wouldn't cooperate. He wouldn't call out to the child. He had basically, the guy shopping went home and took a nap instead of calling out for his child.
Wow.
The little girl's mother and the maternal side was very upset. And they said to media, he's not cooperating. And then he talked about, it was a show, the Nancy Grace show here years ago on television, where Nancy would highlight cases like this. So Nancy did highlight this one, and basically reaching out to the public saying, if you've seen this child, let us know. She's helping. So
what was the name of the child? What was the name of the child?
Ayla Reynolds.
Ayla. Okay.
Yeah, baby Ayla.
The reason I asked, you did a statement analysis on Crime Watch.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
That's okay. So finally, the Nancy Grace show, he responded and said, she could come up here to Maine and walk in my shoes and know what it's like to be me, father of a missing child. So Nancy did. She sent her producers up to Maine to interview him, and he wouldn't come out of the house. He hid in the house. And he finally said, contrary to rumors floating around out there, I have been cooperating with police. Contrary to rumors floating around out there. That's where he put the baby, in water.
Really?
That was in his mind.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
And it's called latency, or what we sometimes call it leakage. It's where a thought I'm trying to suppress because I don't want to get caught. It's stressful. It's stressful for me. It's stressful for psychopaths. It's stressful for sociopaths. I don't want to get caught. I don't want to be called a liar. I don't want the consequences. So I suppress a thought, and I may even begin to ridicule it, which I'll get to how this is part of the McCanns. Ridicule it, and in doing so, I may end up inadvertently giving out the information I was trying to conceal. And if someone has this training in great degree, they're very well trained and they're excellent at this, they will not be able to lie once they begin to speak freely, choosing their own words. Once they start talking, they're in trouble. So we have this expectation, and we go into the interview knowing the statistics that 90% of all deception is going to be by missing information. Therefore, much of what is said is going to be reliable and able to be used. So we listen very carefully to what they say, and we believe them. We let them guide us. We trust their words. And we will listen to what they say and what's missing. So what would someone say who had a baby kidnapped? They're going to say, my baby's been kidnapped, my child's been kidnapped. And then the instinct is going to take over. Now, you recall the story, many people know the story of Solomon and the decision between the two mothers. The Solomonic wisdom, thousands of years we've known it. So two mothers gave birth to little boys living in the same tent. One suffocated her child, accidentally rolling over during the night, and switched the babies. And for however this worked out, going to the judges didn't work, and eventually going through the appellate system, they ended up in Solomon's court. And Solomon said this: Mother A says The dead child is hers, but the living child is mine. Mother B says, no, the living child is mine, the dead child is hers. He repeats the arguments, and apparently no one got it. No one understood what he was saying. So he said, bring me a sword, cut the baby in half, and give them each half. And Solomon had no intention of doing this. The one mother on the one side said, that's fine with me. We'll each have half. The other mother said, no, give her the child. And everyone knew that was the natural mother. That was the truthful mother. Prior to that, if you were listening carefully, you would have noticed that each mother mentioned two children. Each mother mentioned their own child first. The dead child is hers, the living child is mine. The other one said, no, the living child is mine, the dead child is hers. It's a natural human instinct. It's a maternal instinct. Wow. It's very powerful. So when Maddie went missing, what we expect to hear from the mother, from the father, who has fed her when she was hungry, changed her when she was dirty and uncomfortable, picked her up when she had fallen, put a Band-Aid on her knee when she scraped it, comforted her tears, had been there over and over and over and over again. They're going to wonder out loud and worry and express it that they can't help her right now. They're going to speak of that frustration. They're going to speak about her favorite toy, the food that she absolutely will not eat. If she has any medication, the medication she must have, her needs. We call this the linguistic disposition. So if I say, I like steak. Oh, I love my steak rare. I like it with lots of salt. I eat it 3 times a week. After a while, you'd say, this guy likes steak. His linguistic disposition towards steak is really positive. He really likes his steak. If I said, well, liver is one of the most nutritious foods that anyone can ever eat. Unfortunately, I've never eaten it because when I was a little boy, I saw TV shows where kids would say, we're having liver. Oh, no. And you would see I have a negative disposition towards liver in my language. What was the McCann's disposition towards Madeleine? When people listen to the interview, even if they have no training, they're going to say, hey, they're talking a lot about themselves, not a lot about Madeleine. They're not worried about Madeleine and what she's going through. They're not worried about what she's eating, if she's warm enough, where she's at, any of those things. This would be called a negative linguistic disposition towards the victim. And there's a reason for it. So we began the analysis, we being analysts around the world, not just me, but lots of them. We began it with the presupposition that they're telling us the truth, their words are going to guide us, and they didn't do it. And they themselves talked us out of that position. They worked overtime to make sure they avoided all the natural responses. And if I give them a pass on this, and I give them a pass on that, and I give them a pass again on this other thing because they're stressed, they're people think they're lying, and give them all the passes you want, you still have to say for them what they themselves would not say in order to see innocence. And so they're, especially with friends from Britain, they saw that and they were angry at being lied to. And then there were those that were on the fence, listened to the interview. Richard did a very good job letting me bring it through point by point. Now, he and I may not agree on everything, but he conducted a good interview. He allowed me to tell what was going on there. Now, I am not an expert investigator. I'm good at what I do. I'm not good or an expert at forensics. It's the words that I'm good at, and that's basically it. So lots of things I don't understand, but I do know and can come to a conclusion when someone is speaking, if they're speaking from experiential memory or they're not, and they're withholding information, they're halting, they're pausing unnaturally. They are using tangents to move away from the topic, and what they don't say is alarming. So it's really good for people to challenge the analysis, and when they do so, I like to ask them, what's wrong with this point? What's wrong with that point? And some people will make some good notations, and others will simply revert to what is most commonly done, is to attack motive or attack credentials. And that is to avoid answering the questions that we want to pose. So some of your viewers will have questions I won't be able to answer because I don't have knowledge of those things. Some things I have an opinion on, and I have to be careful with that, but I know what I know from their words. Their words guided me, and that's probably the safest place for me.
Well, you're referring to the interview they did on Australian TV where he was asked, did you kill your daughter, right? That's the main one.
Yes.
I have two clips that I've put aside. One is the initial one, the first one, where they describe about her voice and how loud she was. I also have the one, the clip about did you kill your daughter, and your thoughts on it. Whenever you'd like me to play either one of those or just one of them, let me know, so that some of the people watching might not be familiar with that. And I think for them to see it and see for themselves the interview, it might be helpful to them.
Okay, we can get to that. I've done a number of their interviews, so sometimes it may blur for me, but none of the subsequent interviews moved my position.
No.
We begin by, it's not, people sometimes think it's like a high moral or ethical position. It's not. It's neutral. It's based on statistics. People rarely lie outright. Now, what that means is that when they're freely choosing their own words, they'll struggle to lie. And I know that it's more popular to say, oh, people tell 27 lies a minute, and that's not really true. A yes or no question is a low-stress way of lying. So that's a different category for us. We listen for the pronouns. One of the things that Richard asked was about, and I nicknamed it crowdsourcing guilt. It's where someone should be speaking alone for themselves, and they're using the plural pronoun, or they even drop a pronoun. It's like every mom of a teenager knows that when a teenager says, "Mom didn't do it," they're not saying "I didn't do it." They're dropping themselves out. They're psychologically ejecting themselves. It's like, uh-oh, mom knows. Mom's radar's up. Mom's got him. Went to Bob's house. Who went to Bob's house? That sort of thing. So they get that. So we listen very carefully to the pronouns. It's really important.
Peter, while you're on that subject, we had two questions, and one from Emily, who is a longtime supporter of Lizzie, and somebody who has 3 kids about autism. Emily has autism, and so they're asking, how do you tell the difference between a lie and nerves or an autistic reply? And then the mother says, I'm interested to know when analyzing people, do you have to take this into account? My kids may have unnecessary details, although they're telling the truth.
Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes. And I'll give an example. But not only do we have a tremendous rise of autism, and my heart goes out to her and so many others with that, but also psychotropic drugs or medications, however you want to view them, that our children are put on will impact them as well, impact their language, impact their body language. It's one of the things I talk about with body language. We all use it. It's difficult to teach, but we all use it. We all survive on it, which makes it really difficult thinking how kids can't see someone that's wearing a mask. Kids survive by looking at someone's face. And that may be producing some long-term damage. But I'll give you an example. Nathan Carmen was a young man in the United States who his grandfather, a multimillionaire, died of a shotgun blast. And his mother and her sister inherited the money. Nathan went out for a boat ride with his mother out fishing, and they capsized, and Nathan was later rescued by the Coast Guard. 2020, it's a news program here in the United States, asked me to analyze it, and I said Nathan is lying. They said Nathan has Asperger's, which has some similar traits to autism in terms of communication. When someone with autism or Asperger's, when they speak, do they have an expectation of being understood? That's the key. And so what a mom will note, even about children with autism who may give extra details and may go off on certain tangents, is that they are consistent with what they do. So if something was really short, for example, the mom may take notice that this is breaking the pattern. Or extra details that may be important to them, we listen for anyway. So in Nathan's case, he presupposed that when he spoke, people would understand him. And we did. And he was deceptive. But it's an important distinction to make. And what we do, especially with autism and Asperger's, is we make an allowance for a lack of emotion. That can be something that should be considered. Because emotionally, there may be some mute going on, a muted response, for example. And some others can be demonstrative. And so we look for a change in pattern. But great question and a proper question to ask. Again, if there's something within the analysis where we say, you know, this could be like a medication influencing them, this could be their autism like that, discount it, put it away. Give them a pass on that. Give them a cultural pass. Give them a regional pass on an expression. Give every pass you possibly can. If what remains is still the conclusion that they're deceptive, they are deceptive. But we will try to make every allowance possible.
Can I just ask you, and I noticed it particularly in the interview coming up, is do you ever take into consideration the actual body language, or do you just work off transcriptions?
Most of my work is off transcription. We don't even want to hear the audio generally until afterwards. When I interview someone in person, I often look away. I don't want to know the body language. It can influence me.
Yeah.
I had a case once where a young girl who had claimed to have been raped in a movie theater had a tremendous disability, and her body was disjointed and somewhat mangled together, no fluid body movement. And looking at her during the interview, I could feel myself getting a little teary. So I would look away. I did look away, but I would do that frequently, look away, and then still be drawn back to her. And she said that he raped me, and we drove home, and I cried and I called the police. And I heard her say that after he raped her, we drove home. So when she used the pronoun we, that shows unity with the rapist. And once there's a victim of rape, we do not expect to hear the word we coming from the victim after the assault. So I had known this case was rather a pressure case in terms of politicians and disability rights advocates getting involved, and it was troublesome. And my superior said to me, because I said, she's lying, and she said to me, Peter, are you willing to put your career and reputation on the line over a single pronoun? And I said, yes. Pronouns are instinctive. Pronouns are powerful. Pronouns is something we use millions of times. We don't stop to think. We just use them. So she had said, well, how do you think we go about this? And I said, well, I think I should confront her, but in the presence of therapists or other professionals, because I don't want her committing suicide and going to pieces. Now remember, I saw her with my eyes and I got a little teary. I got a little upset because it was such a pathetic and sad case. But I now know she's lying, and this 19-year-old boy is going to go to jail. So when it came time for the confrontation, I said, you haven't been truthful, and here's how I know. And she said, yeah, but he broke up with me. And I was shocked.
Gee.
The body language had drew me in with pity. The language, my training, maybe saved that 19-year-old kid from going to jail. So
Wow.
I need to look away. I need not to become emotionally involved. Are you familiar with the John Benet Ramsey case here in the States back in 96, 97?
Partly, but not to any great degree, because that was prior to internet, right?
Yeah, that we call that when I'm talking to UK friends, America's Maddie. And when I'm talking to American friends, they say, oh, that's like the UK's Madeleine. Compare the cases like that. She was a beautiful 6-year-old girl. And the first time I saw it, I was watching the news with my own beautiful 6-year-old girl on my lap. And there was an immediate, like an emotional response, an empathetic response. Oh no, these poor parents. I am a person of faith. They were people of faith. So I had empathy with that as well. And then I listened to them and everything changed. So it something where after analysis is done, we'll compare with what's known. This is really interesting. And for some people, it might be a little bit too much. Posted on the blog recently, but one of my colleagues did analysis on a missing woman. And all he had to go on was the transcripts of I think about a 7-minute interview with a reporter in a parking lot, 6 or 7 minutes. And I think it was 1 or 2 lines tops of an emergency 999 or 911 call. And he did brilliant analysis with some absolute minute details into what really happened. She wasn't missing. He killed her. And we later learned as a team from the display of the facts afterwards that as he was in that parking lot talking about how her car was found, her dead body was in the trunk the whole time. And he did a little bit of a feigning of emotion and crying and being upset and all that. And experts love to, after the fact, say this and that. But at listening to someone like that, I'm not good at that. I get caught up in the moment emotionally, and that can really take me off. So I've listened to Kate and I've listened to Jerry carefully. And I have observed their body language and I have certain opinions about it. It doesn't always fit the stereotypical view that many have. And it doesn't match the anger sometimes that people have. I haven't been over there and I haven't had politicians and officials backing them constantly. I haven't been lied to for all these years. I haven't seen the exploitation, because it's not on the news here often, of finances from the. So they have an anger and they have a right to their anger. I don't mess with it, but I am distant from it. I just want to know and follow the principles that I know of the language.
I think there's something that's important to keep in mind with the Madeleine, with the McCanns. And a lot of people judge them because they do appear to be really upset. But the thing is, Madeleine died. So they, of course, are going to be upset. According to the Portuguese police, Madeleine died in the apartment. So, of course, they're going to have that grief. And that I have found it is misinterpreted by people who say they're upset because she was taken. So there's always going to be the grief there because their daughter did die, as we know it, as the Portuguese police have told us. But certainly in their statements, you are the person that can really, really tell us what happened.
If I close my eyes and not look at them and feel pity for them and have it influence me. A maternal instinct, go back to that, I gave birth to her, I nursed her, I cared for her, I lost sleep every day over her, I did all those things and they were wonderful. And then all of a sudden one day I can't do anything for her. That feeling of impotency causes rage. That rage can be turned inward into depression, but it's rage. It burns underneath a parent, even a grandparent, aunt or uncle, caretaker, close friend. It can rage in all of us. What happens is, to survive, we have a natural denial. And one of the first things that people say when they hear about a loved one's death is, no, it's natural. A mother that child went missing and the child's found deceased, and if the child is put in the mother's arms and the body's cold, the mother will instantly begin to rub the body, trying to warm the body. It's a reflex. It's very powerful. What happened with the McCanns, by the time they gave interviews, they had already processed her death. The brain had already been confronted. And the reason why, and this is so important to understand, the reason why the McCanns did not talk about what Maddie was going through at the moment, which would have been unbearable, is that they knew that Madeleine was beyond their help.
Yeah, I
And
think that
they could get a moral justification for their lies. We didn't do it on purpose. It was foolish, but we didn't do it on purpose. And if we tell the truth, they're going to take away the two other babies. And that's going to bring more harm. And they conspire to cover it up, which can become terribly sinister in people's minds. But it really is about self-preservation. So when Jerry and when they spoke one after another and then sometimes together, people were incensed that they only speak about themselves. It's all about them. It's all about them. It was, because Madeleine was gone. She was already deceased. They couldn't help her. And now they've got to save the other kids and themselves.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, did you ever read Kate's book?
I didn't. I haven't.
Okay, that's probably a good thing. But there is one question there, and I think it was the first thing when the book first came out. I think everybody was just incensed. We couldn't believe that Kate referred to Madeleine's private parts in the book.
Yeah, I read excerpts from it.
Yeah, and why? I mean, do you have any thoughts on why she would have put that in the book?
It's more from a profiling point of view. We do linguistic profiling. What that means is we don't say, if there's a shooting, well, it's probably a middle-aged white male living in his mother's basement with a beer belly and who's really making low earn, the typical profiling that became very popular, and everyone's a psychopath and everyone's living in their mother's basement, that sort of thing. What we look at is 4 distinct features. When someone speaks, they reveal their background, they reveal their experiences, they reveal their dominant personality traits, and then, of course, contextually, they reveal what their priority is. So linguistic profiling is used to identify an author of an anonymous threatening letter. So if you received a bomb threat at your home, and Lizzie, we're going to kill your family, that sort of thing, we would analyze that, and we say we give 10 descriptions of the author. If 7 out of 10 of those descriptions is accurate, you're going to know who sent it. And so we as a team have a great track record over the years of identifying people who have sent anonymous threatening letters or anonymous threatening emails. or have received notes, like racial hatred notes, that prove to be fake hate. That's how we do it. Those are the four characteristics or elements that we look for in the language. Now, if I said to you, hey, you know, that question's a real curveball. Oh, I hit that one out of the park. Swing and a miss. I missed that one. After a while, you'd think, that guy likes baseball. It's that natural. A little bit exaggerated there, but it's that natural. So think about what it's like to be a doctor. I thought a little bit of hot water on this one recently, but I had shoulder and bicep surgery. It was awful. It was god awful. And I was teaching law enforcement, and I was not able to use my right arm at all. So I couldn't tie my shoes. So I tried to hide it best I could, but in front of a class, it's difficult. You're walking around and getting ready to trip. And someone in the front row offered to tie my shoe for me. It was very embarrassing.
That's kind of.
And I made a crack about doctors and the God complex. And she said, oh, my husband's a doctor. He's a total narcissist. And, it ended up being a humorous point between us. And I was grateful for her tying my shoe. I'm not sure exactly what it's like there, but here you might wait months for an appointment to see a doctor. You'll go to the office and you'll wait once you're there again, well beyond the time of your appointment. You'll get in, sit down, and you'll have about 10 minutes of an audience, like a papal audience with the doctor. And then the doctor will Google your symptoms and tell you what pill that he's going to give you, and you're out. And then 6 months later, maybe you can be seen again. It's just an awful system. And doctors begin to think of themselves sometimes as with a godlike complex where they can do anything. And so you look at Jerry and Kate and you look at their profession and the arrogance of leaving the children alone, especially a toddler, incapable of self-protection. That's a certain mindset, certain personality type. I believe that the children were sedated. Children or Madeleine, maybe just Maddie, maybe the babies wouldn't need it, but Maddie was sedated because when she was asked to talk about, just before Maddie went missing, Kate went to talking about what she fed her, what she gave her to eat. She's thinking about the mouth and going in this way. And she mentioned something about everything was fine before. And I thought, she's going to the mouth of something ingested. And as a doctor, did she give that baby even mild cough syrup or an antihistamine to put that child to sleep so she can go out with her friends and have dinner? Now, it takes a certain personality to do that. There's arrogance there, and there's a lack of care. Neglect is really easy. It's the easiest form of child abuse. Just do nothing. And neglect raises its ugly head. So when I know this is a long way to go around, but I don't have definitive analysis that says that little girl was sexually abused. I suspect it based on who they are and things like that clip, that part of the book. The father's demeanor bothers me a great deal. The hardness that they have become over the years, their ability to maintain the deception, it's been severe. And that antagonizes the public. And they seem to sometimes not to care. Other times they seem to almost enjoy it and to mock and condescend down to the audience. That brings me over to their embedded condition.
Sorry. Can I just ask you, do you notice a difference between their early statements and their later statements? Because is it possible that they've had training? Obviously, I think that's happened. But the point also that I want to make is the one that is later, which is one of the Australian interview. They seem to be quite obviously lying, in my opinion, and many others. So is there a difference that you've seen in the early statements as opposed to the later ones?
Yes, I think they may have had coaching, but I don't think they've had any training. Training doesn't work anyway in this field. Once someone's speaking freely, it doesn't work. You're still a human. You're still subject to the laws of human nature.
It was just the wrong word, coaching.
What the change that I saw over time, over the years, is very concerning. And that's another reason why I have my suspicions about what that poor kiddo went through. The language would reflect, and I say would, meaning over a progression of time, what's called self-referencing. They're repeating what they said earlier rather than going from experiential memory. It's far safer. So that's one thing. So instead of, you can hear it in phrases like I said, as I told the other person, they're no longer working from experiential memory. They're working on the memory, from the memory of previous interviews. This is why it starts to get duller and duller as you go along. Then there is the part of human nature. And this is very concerning to me. There's two basic views of human nature. One is the classic view and one is the therapeutic view. The classic view is what everybody in law enforcement knows firsthand and can be quite unfortunate in that sense. That's the classic view. Is the most faiths have a classic view. People that discipline their children, teach their children boundaries or manners, they have the classic view of human nature. Basically, if you give me a little boy and I say, I'm going to have a free-range child, he's going to do whatever he wants. He's going to run in the street. He's going to get in trouble. He's not going to live by the rules. And eventually he could end up in a cage, which is a jail cell. That's what happens to people that refuse to abide by the rules. But if you teach him to be respectful, if he's not allowed to hit his sister or talk back to his mother or skip his homework or have candy for breakfast and all those simple things, he's more likely to have success and even empathy for others. A great study was done in Appalachia of those who in the same area in poverty levels went to prison, those who did not. And what they discovered was they all had similar discipline, but the ones that end up not in prison were told, don't hit your sister, it hurts her, versus those that did end up in prison, don't hit your sister. The latter was taught empathy. So what happens is, over time, in the classic view of human nature, the therapeutic view is like a Marxist view. We're going to change human nature. We're going to make it into something different for our sake, for control. We see that today where, I can identify as anyone I want. If I really hold my breath and have a real strong emotion about something else, I'm going to magically turn into a young woman. That's the therapeutic view. It's very popular today. The classic view is what law enforcement experience on a daily basis. They deal with its ugly side all the time. They know they don't struggle with it, and they do very well in instruction.
Okay, now.
Well, I was going to get to the.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Carry on.
When you get away with a lie, at first you could face a dilemma. I can feel really bad about this, but I need to lie again because I got to protect the other two children. And what happens is they become desensitized. They become hardened. They become cynical. But they also become so high-minded that they can't help but breathe out their contempt for others. When you see an accomplished liar, that accomplished liar has been getting away with it since kindergarten. They're hardened. They're desensitized to what lies do to other people. They're very dangerous. That's what I see in these two liars over the years, a hardness and a contempt for the rest of the public. And I think they've been cashing in ever since.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's I think most of us that are fully aware of a lot from the files can see it. It's just hard to believe that those that haven't accessed the files are just taken in by it, but that's what the media has led them to believe. Now, before, I would like to show that clip because I'm not sure that a lot of people in the chat or viewers have actually seen that. So, and it's regarding what you've been talking about. But before we do, I see there's another little comment there that Shirley's put up that Peter said he knows from the statements where the body was hidden. Can he update that?
No, I don't know where the body was hidden. I have suspicion. One of the purposes of reading Kate's book, which I didn't get to, just too many cases, too much time.
And it's not worth it.
Which is, no, but this is a legitimate complaint, I think. Is it possible that she, in the book, in a latent manner, revealed the location of the body? And it is possible. It would take a lot of hours to do that I don't have, but it might be a worthwhile project to put a team together and divide chapters up, that sort of thing. But what it means is, it means exploration. For instance, I know a number of people that have followed this case very closely, much more closely than I have wondered whether or not she was thrown into water down a well, for example. And that is something that should be looked into. With latency in language, we don't know definitively, we explore for. So I had thought, when I said before, contrary to rumors floating around out there, I have been cooperating police. Oh boy, that baby's in water. Later on, I learned things that would affirm that. But at that time, it's like, okay, search water. Because the water came into his thinking, the dad's thinking, that sort of thing. Later on, we look like geniuses, but at the time, we don't know. It's like a speculation based on the language. It does prove to be true quite often, but it doesn't always mean that.
Okay. So is it okay with you if we just show that clip from the Australian interview, which I think is one of the most telling interviews that they've ever done? Well, a lot of them are, but this one in particular. Is that okay with you, or did you have something more to say before? Okay. I'll just put this on.
The past tense reference is one thing that indicates death, but this is the most powerful.
I'm just saying there's a lot of questions. So when we can get to them, I have them all listed.
I got to give shorter answers.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's just every time you say something, then it opens up a whole bunch of new questions. So I'm trying to group them so we can kind of get them all at one time. So, but I don't want to keep putting them up on screen because I have a lot that were asked earlier. So the comments aren't available anymore. So I'll have to just verbally ask you those ones when we get to them. Just wanted to let you know.
Great.
Okay. Now, maybe I'll just show the actual comments that he said, and if you want to reflect on those, Peter, or did you want me to leave the comments that you made on Richard's show?
No, whichever you'd like to do.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to show this. So, okay, let's try.
The past tense reference is one thing that indicates death, but this is the most powerful part of the analysis, is that they're telling us Madeleine is dead. Now, I know that people wondered if there was a kidnapping, if they were sold into sex rings, child sex rings, and these things do exist. That's not what's in the parents' language. So I can only say what's in that language. And I'm letting them guide me. I'm letting them dictate to me my opinion by the words that they're choosing. Mm-hmm. And they're actually going to give us more detail. Mm-hmm. Richard, they're going to confess.
You think so? Oh, you mean in the subtext of the interview? You don't mean literally, do you?
They're in this statement. We're going to see what we call a statement analysis confession. They actually admit to us what happened.
Did you kill your daughter?
No, that's an emphatic no. I mean, the ludicrous thing is what's been purported from Portugal is that Madeleine died in the apartment by an accident, and we hid her body. well, when did she have the accident and died? Because the only time she was left unattended was when we were at dinner. So if she died then, how could we have disposed or hidden her body, when there was an immediate threat? It's just nonsense. So, and if she died when we were in the apartment or fell and did something, why would we cover that up?
And this is what we call the embedded confession. This is where a guilty party will put together in their own language what happened. And we need to listen and believe them. We also have the principle of them asking questions. This is very important. They're asking questions to find out how their answers will be responded to. Will it be ridicule? Would it be acceptance? Will it sound sane? Will it help get them off the hook? Listen very carefully to what they say. It's a yes or no question. Did you kill your daughter? No is a good answer. And what I teach investigators to do is when someone is asked a yes or no question is to count on their fingers the number of words following the word no. No. That's an emphatic no. And on and on, and obviously it goes into the point where it goes beyond your 10 fingers. When it goes that long, very simply speaking, there is a need to persuade. So the no is not going to stand on itself. If he said, no, I didn't kill my daughter and I'm telling you the truth, this would be something very strong. And then we'd have to ask about her. And we'd also have to ask, did something cause your daughter's death? That sort of thing. But here, no, that's an emphatic no. The first thing we know about his denial is that his denial, from his perspective, needs some help. It's weak. That's an emphatic no. So the first thing is no, okay. An emphatic no. My no needs emphasis. Why does it need to be emphasis? Is one. I mean, the ludicrous thing is what I suppose what's been purported from Portugal is that Madeleine died in the apartment by accident and we hid her body. Okay. What he tells us here is Madeleine died in the apartment, his words, by an accident, which would support the pronoun we that we heard between mother and child, and we hid her body. I believe him. The reason I say this is an embedded confession is because he is not entering any other language. He's not quoting anyone. For instance, if I said, well, you said that I killed her, that's not an embedded confession because I'm actually quoting you. Here, he's not only is he not quoting anyone, he's only saying what's been purported, not even an accusation. And we need to be listening to him. This now tells me, as an analyst, Madeleine died in the apartment. So I know from their language thus far that Madeleine is not alive. They are in need of an alibi. The death was not intended, and the location of the death is in the apartment. And again, by accident. And then I know something else now. I know that we hid the body. Jerry and his wife, the two McCanns together, they worked together to hide her body. Then he goes into questions, and this is where guilty parties are looking to see what a response is. They're disguised as rhetorical questions, but they want to see what people respond to them as. This takes place even in the interview process. Well, when did she have the accident and died? Okay, what they want to know is, do people know the exact time of death? Because the only time she was left unattended is not the only time we left her. He's now removing himself from that. Left unattended is passive. Was when we, which shows unity between him and his wife, were at dinner. So if she died then, which this is, we call this an allowance. The father of a missing child is allowing for a scenario that denial will not allow. There's no natural denial. He's saying if she died, then, not even if she was dead, which is itself a red flag, but now about a specific time. How could we have hidden her body? The word disposed and then hidden, the change there, actually shows respect for Madeleine. It's a softer terminology. not dump the body, and he even changes dispose, self-correction from dispose to hidden. He now tells us that they didn't dispose the body, they actually hid it. This is why, and this confirms the priority. We want there to be light, we want there to be searching. By the way, we also want them to find Madeleine, but it's last on my list of priorities. So I now know that Madeleine is dead, Madeleine died in the apartment, and listen to his questions. When did we do this? How did we do this? You know, when there's an immediate, it's just nonsense, self-censoring again. And if she died when we were in the apartment or fell and died, why would we cover that up? Okay, that's the most important question he asks. So he now introduces something else that may have happened. Madeleine fell. I am concerned and remain concerned that Madeleine may have been drugged in any way, shape, or form, whether it be nighttime cough syrup or something more, so that these people could go and have their dinner and their party and get their break and all that, that Madeleine awoke and fell and got injured, and the injury was beyond.
Well, I think you can see why, after watching that particular clip, why I asked about body language. I think there was a lot about body language during the course of him saying that. So, but that's an amazing analysis. It really is, and important too.
It's just common sense. Did you kill your daughter? No. She's not dead. Even when he presented what they purported, it wasn't words, but what they purported, even if we assign that to someone else, reducing the possibility of an embedded admission, he went on to go, we hid her. That pronoun linking them together. At that point, he should tell us, we didn't do that. I didn't do that. Madeleine didn't hit her head. I don't know what happened. But he can't. He's got to persuade. And what the use of the questions is very powerful. And this is a little bit on the comical side. We have a professional athlete over here who was testifying about the use of performance-enhancing drugs, specifically HGH, human growth hormone. So he said, so if I took HGH, who is it that brought it to me? Who sold it to me? Who delivered it to my house? He's asking these questions. And this is the arrogance coming out. This is how people get caught. If I took HGH, meaning I'm allowing it for it to be a possibility. This is only about drugs. We're talking about a baby's life. He's allowing for her to be dead. This is a biological father. He's processed this long before. If I took these drugs, from whom did I buy them? Who delivered them to my house? Then he said arrogantly, I wish whoever did this would just come forward. Guess what happened? The drug dealer came forward. So when they're asking questions, they're probing to see what kind of responses they're going to get. It appears from the perspective of the deceptive person that I am being so dismissive that I'm impenetrable. When the reality is every single word you used after the word no weakened your assertion, weakened your denial. Did you kill your daughter? No, she's not dead. We've got to find her. Please help me find her. If you have her, if I'm speaking to you now, she needs her blue blankie. She loves that blankie. She's not yours. Madeleine belongs to me. And just a father pouring out his heart.
Yeah.
Instead, you see these two stone cold people who are allowing for all this possibility, and all they're doing is ridiculing it. They're ridiculing it because they have contempt for the audience. There's no concern for Madeleine in their voices, not their voices, in their words. The voice inflection bothers me as well, but I'm not an expert at that. Their language deeply bothers me, deeply troubles me, because they process the death. They've already been through it. To them, it's old news. They want to move on. If your child was out there, you don't move on. I had was teaching about 4 or 5 years ago in law enforcement when I went about the word only, something only child. The word only is a dependent word. It means that the person is thinking of something else. So if someone said, this is my only child, you might ask, did you try to have other children or something go wrong? And I said was that I had believed that the subject, the woman speaking that, likely had her parental rights terminated because a mother whose child died is reluctant to exclude that child. And it ended up being true that the speaker had her parental rights terminated on one child and now had another. During the break time, a middle-aged woman came up and said, she got very teary and said, what you say is true. I lost my little boy, I think it was something like 19 years ago. She said, it's still fresh, it still hurts, and I would never exclude him. I would never say I only have one. I had to. One died, but I would never exclude him. So that parental instinct, even after many years, is still very powerful. You see it dead in them. That there's no parental capacity of protection, concern in their words. Not the demeanor so much, and I recognize people hear what they hear with that. Not even with their body language, and I recognize that too. I'm not an expert in those things, but I listen to their words. Tell me she's alive because of natural parental denial, and tell me what she's going through. Tell me you're concerned for her. They're just concerned for themselves and their self-preservation.
Yeah, and I think I've seen that also in a lot of other cases that I've come across. I'm in Canada, by the way, so I am fairly familiar with some of the states' crimes. Now, we've got so many people wanting to ask questions, and here we have one. What does Peter think about one of the early days interviews when Kate informed that she wishes she could press a button and they'd all be gone and all be together? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not. The fantastical thinking like that is very similar to what we call in analysis angelic-like, where a missing child is referred to in terms of fantasy or even religious fantasy. It means the child's dead. Living children are messy. And so, but by doing that type of fantastical description, it's be concerning. Now, it's hard for me to consider that without considering the rest of the analysis and the rest of the things that she has said. But in that one thing, you know what? A mother of a missing child thinks practically. She's going from aisle to aisle in the supermarket, grocery store, calling the child's name. It's very practical. It's methodical. As a matter of fact, you never hear a mother of an innocent mother say, "And that's all I know," or try to stop the flow of information. They'll call and leave messages at the police station all night long because the brain never shuts off. It's always worried about the child. It's always thinking about that child. Most natural reaction.
Okay. Yeah. It's the interview itself. I mean, her body language went along with it. It was like, I just wish we would all go, we could all be together. They're so telling to even those of us that don't have knowledge of statement or body language. It's, there's too much.
I wish we could all be together. I wonder if she was thinking of the regret of leaving Madeleine.
If the person that asked that gives more information, I'll put it back up. But along those same lines, Joe L asked, and this is way earlier. So when Jerry said they didn't kill Madeleine, Jerry says, no, never at one point. What do you make of that, Peter?
Always listen to the words that follow the denial. First of all, the yes or no is easy to lie to because it's low stress. What happens is you ask me something that I don't want to answer, and I say no. I could be thinking of anything at that time. It's when I speak extemporaneously on my own is when I should issue that denial. There should be no need to even ask that question. So no, never. She went missing on a very specific day and time period. The word never can be appropriately used if, for example, there's a vague allegation that could have taken place at any time over years. So someone said, I'm telling you the truth. I never shot anybody. I never have. But you see how never expands time indefinitely. You have no idea where I'm going to land with that one. Madeleine went missing while you left her. It was a particular day in a location and a particular time. Never is not appropriate there.
Okay. Well, and here's one this is from one of Lizzie's mods from her Facebook group, Cherry. She says, what does Peter think about Kate's comment about thoughts of Madeleine laying on a cold slab?
That's the ability to process her death, the lack of natural denial. I don't know when that was said. If it was said years later, it wouldn't have the same weight as it would early on, but that's someone who's processing the death. And it's a personal as well, because our imaginations can run wild with us.
Yeah,
so
that's
you're
kind
saying,
of the point.
So you're
Her
saying
medical
that's kind of a
background
natural processing step for some people?
It just takes a lot of time, though, especially for a mother. It takes a lot of time. Fathers will come around earlier than mothers, generally.
Okay. Another one from Martin Rangecroft asks, do you think Jerry exerts control over Kate in their relationship? Do you see any evidence of this in the language?
It's a good question. That's hard for me to separate from the body language, which I think he does. There's a former British Intel, a man I admire his work and his intellect and his talents. And he said that he believed that Jerry is sociopathic-like. And so when an opinion like that comes from a man like that, I sit up and take notice.
Sorry, it took me a second to find my mute button.
Oh yeah, your 2 seconds, yeah.
My answer was too short.
No, because I switch back and forth between the YouTube tab and the StreamYard tab, and then it takes me a second. And I'm trying not to completely just derail all your thought processes, but I want to get some of these questions in that were asked a long time ago. There seems to be quite a few questions about the friends, and I'll just say a couple of them and see if that leads you down a certain road. Marianne had asked earlier if Peter has Peter ever looked at the TAPA 7 statements? Do you think any of the friends were involved through Kate and Jerry's language that they've used? Would you please ask Peter if he analyzed any of the other TAPAS member statements? There's two main things people are really curious about, and that's vote, that subject, and then about the dogs. We can get to the dogs next.
I haven't done the TAPA statements. I probably should. Again, that's more of a time and just a time issue for me. I do think that one of the friends, and I apologize for not remembering who it was, but I do think one of the friends, one of the statements indicate strong suspicion. Strong suspicion. So I would imagine one would know.
David Payne. If you were going to do any statements, David Payne, I think, is the one that really is questionable for other reasons too, but yeah, he may be the one you're talking about.
Well, there's a couple people that have mentioned Rachel's statement about Maddie's bump on the head.
And the resuscitation. Yeah, she mentioned resuscitation.
You have to ask, where does that language come from? You know, where do those thoughts come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Where did the thought where if she fell came from? Why does he allow for that?
And Rachel said that if something had happened, they could have resuscitated her. Yeah, so it's very telling.
Yes, I agree.
Right. Okay, so the dogs, really quick. One question was from Sandy Blue. Would you please ask Peter if he analyzed any... Oh, wait, sorry. That's the wrong one. Sorry, wrong color code. Devil's Advocate. What does Peter think about Jerry's remark, ask the dogs, Sandra? And then devil's advocate also as what does Peter think about Jerry's assertion that sniffer dogs are incredibly unreliable?
I think he's deceptive. Why not say, no, the dog was wrong. Madeleine's alive. We've got to find her. I don't know what she's going through right now, but we got to find her.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same type of dismissiveness and ridicule that they use. Cadaver dogs are pretty amazing.
Yeah, he has. He made a point of claiming about the dogs not being reliable, and actually, at one point, mentioned about Zapata, another case, which at the time was not. The dogs were supposedly not reliable. He used it, and later they were found to be correct in that crime. So that was one in the face for him. But yeah, his question from Sandra Felgueras about the dogs was just so wrong.
Someone asked earlier about government officials. It's important to understand that in law enforcement, rank and file may think very differently than leadership, especially elected leaders, depending on the country, depending on the county, depending on the local statutes, that sort of thing. Sometimes at the top of law enforcement are elected or appointed officials who are no different than politicians. Politicians don't like to be wrong. So if they think the wind is blowing from the left to the right and everyone's feeling sorry for Jerry and Kate, they're going to jump on the bandwagon. Don't ever expect them, in the face of evidence, to change their mind. If it becomes overwhelming, the evidence, maybe a concession at best, but more likely is going to be just a step back into the silent shadows. We had a case here, a low-level actor named Jussie Smollett said that 2 MAGA hat-wearing guys beat him up. And so the politicians and the celebrities ran to his defense, and he was lying from the very beginning and showed quite a bit wrong with not only his account, but himself. When it was discovered that he had hired 2 extras on the set of his TV show to do a fake beat up of him so he could do this and make this fake hate claim, the politicians were either silent or expressed sorrow for him. So never expect any politician that jumped on a bandwagon of the McCanns to back off. It's just self-preservation for them, and there may be more involved there, but it's not quite as nefarious as people think it can be or conspiratorial. It's just opportunistic.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. So another
really quick. Sorry, really
Yeah.
quick. There's a few more questions that are general questions about what you do, and I thought if you guys are okay with it, we can save those towards the end and kind of stick with the McCann questions. But I think I'm mostly caught up, so from now on, I'm just going to be putting the questions up on the screen.
Okay,
Are you going to read them?
maybe we need to address the psychic issue as well. I don't know whether
Yes.
there's I'm not really familiar with whether there was too many psychics that came into the Madeleine case. I know it was discussed, but your opinion on psychics?
I've only analyzed a few, and that is by choice. Not a select few, just a few that were presented, because psychics have no ability to ascertain information other than natural human means. They're lying. So they're deceptive. They don't find missing children. The vagueness of, well, she's scared and it's dark and she's really hungry and all that type of goofiness. Facebook has multiplied the number of psychics, and generally speaking, I find some real personality issues of someone that craves attention and craves a sense of being special and different from others. So psychic can muck up cases pretty badly, and I did a documentary on another missing person, And then I was followed by a psychic. And I look back and I think perhaps I should have declined, or I didn't think they had a psychic, but I should have asked, hey, are you going to interview a psychic on this program? And then I could have bailed out. I don't want to be associated.
Yeah.
There's no magical finding of information. And if it is, tell me tomorrow's lottery, please.
Yeah, I wish I could access it right now, but I can't. But there is an official quote from the FBI that no psychic has ever led to finding anybody in a criminal case, and the same from the Met Police. And I do have those, but I can't show them right now. But yeah, they've never found helped in any case in that way.
With a success rate of 0%, why do people continue to go back to it? And then you'll see it sometimes it's in their language, especially on Facebook. We call them the Facebook detective psychics, where they kind of mimic each other's language. But there's a need to be seen as unique and gifted and talented. And so the words that change a little bit, minimized. I'm an intuitive. Why don't you just use the word psychic? Whip out the tarot cards and let's go. That kind of silly thing.
Yeah.
It has no place
tarot cards. Tarot cards are the same in your opinion?
Well, when they flip cards, remember the opera Carmen, where she drew the death card, believing that this is going to somehow reveal what's coming tomorrow. No.
Yeah.
We don't know what's tomorrow.
Yeah, I think many of us are familiar with how tarot card readers have predicted who is responsible, even to that point of a murder, and I just find it totally disgusting.
Lizzie, they're like ghouls who prey upon innocent parents. They're like vultures, and so they. Yeah. Especially if a case begins to die down, if I was a parent of a missing child, I'd be open to everything, including the crazy psychics. It's like a person that's in chronic pain. They'll try anything. Yeah. Anything to ease that pain. And this is what happens with the pain of a missing child. So they descend upon them and they prey upon them and then they move on.
Yeah, after they've got their money.
Yes.
Yeah. So there was a comment earlier asking who you felt was, I think, more in charge of everything regarding what happened, if I've explained that correctly, but yes. something of that.
I think that Kate is quite capable, but I still lean towards Jerry being the one that took charge.
Yeah.
If that was what the question was.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't remember the actual wording, but yeah, Kate definitely is the lesser of the two. Jerry has an arrogance that intimidates, I think. Whether it just be Kate or us. Okay, Michael Klein, covering up. Might be leakage, covering up with concrete. Do you think that might have an issue there?
Yes, it certainly could. And Michael's quite good at this, and he may be onto that. That was one of the ideas of what we would do, is need to explore that.
Okay. Did you have any thoughts? Well, I think you've been asked that question before, whether where they may have hid her.
So the water question comes up a lot because it's so commonly used to dispose of bodies, but burial as well. We had a case of 2 missing little boys in California recently where the sheriff said, we're going to dig up all the clues we can. And I thought, the sheriff just gave away what they think happened to the little boys, got buried somewhere in the desert. So Michael's a professional analyst. He knows what he's talking about, and that would be one of the things we'd have to explore for.
Nice to meet you, Michael. Thank you for being here. And thanks to everybody for being here and all the mods. So they do a great job. They keep that chat just running smoothly. So Carmen, she wants to know about your view on Kate's response as to why she didn't think of searching. She says, I mean, I did. We've been very busy. She didn't answer the question. What did you make of that? Do you remember that interview? It was one of the I think may have been the first interview.
Yes,
when
and
they were
that
asking about searching.
There you got a marriage of behavioral analysis and statement analysis together. She is dismissive of searching. She doesn't want the child found because she knows the child is dead. And she knows that will bring consequences upon her, or if she can say there'll bring consequences upon my children. I can bear the consequences, but they can't bear it. They shouldn't be punished for an accident. So that's a great point that she pulled out there. Very dismissive.
Yeah. And definitely...
And the pronoun changed to we. That was another thing. It's crowdsourcing guilt.
Okay. Asking about the tennis bag. We couldn't have hidden it, put a body in it or anything like that. That David Payne, I think. Everybody, all of them were asked about whether or not the McCanns had a tennis bag. It was denied by everybody in the statements. And there was actually a blue bag that was photographed in the apartment by the forensics, but that bag never appeared later, as did the pink blanket disappear as well. So when David Payne was interviewed, he came up with that comment about that you couldn't hide a body in it. I think that's very telling for any of us that are not statement analysis. Well,
yeah, it's a defensive posture. I'm not familiar with the statement, but it's a defensive posture.
Oh, really? Okay.
Maybe the German pedophile played tennis, right? And they could stretch like that. And I'm being sarcastic.
Okay. Is there any verbiage in their statements? This is from Helen Happy Thoughts, one of our wonderful mods. Is there any verbiage in their statements that connects the church or the church grounds as her final resting place, or where she may have been hidden?
Not that I'm aware of now.
Yeah, it's difficult. I'm sure you haven't. It took me 4 years to go through all the statements. So when you say you haven't been through them, I totally get it. Totally get it. So do you have any thoughts on, from Jacqueline Watt, do you have any thoughts on Freemasonry connection?
Yeah, I've seen nothing in the language about it.
Okay.
I'm not much of a conspiratorial theorist, and it gets a little bit boring. Sometimes with the conspiracy theorists, the answer lies in opportunity and in finance, money making, and then people jump on a bandwagon, and next thing you know, it will appear to be a conspiracy that's larger than it really is. Criminals do conspire; they do work together. But this has taken on, I think, in the Madeleine McCann case, a life of its own.
Yeah, and I think you focus more on what they say and their
Correct.
words.
Yeah.
And and that's why it's important. And certainly I don't want to get into details about anything that happened, just explaining the some of the questions. So, okay.
Lizzie, I just put that question back up that I had put up there and removed, and you were trying to remember what it's who does he think informs the story strongest of what happened, Kate or Jerry?
Okay, that's a better.
Good question. I'm not sure of the answer because both of them are lying together. They're deceptive together. Kate said we hid the body incredibly well, and she did so in a mocking manner. But those aren't the words that came from anyone else. They weren't even a notion from anyone else. They came from her, a mother of a missing child. That's an embedded admission. Give you an example of embedded admission, a pronoun confession. There was a case up in Canada many years ago where a young male had been accused of killing a younger girl who he didn't know. He didn't even know her. And later on it was found that he gave her a ride on his bike. And he said, I didn't even know my victim. And that's all it took. He claimed ownership of her with the pronoun my victim. Now, the word my is a possessive pronoun, and it is something that we've used millions of times in our lives, and it likely predates even our speech. Little babies, I don't know if like camera is good here, but little babies do this with their hands, my. It's something that's so instinctive and part of human nature that we never get it wrong. O.J. Simpson said, for those of you that believe in my guilt, he's taking ownership of guilt. In the John Benet Ramsey, the mother did the same thing. So when Kate said, we hit her incredibly well, I believe her.
Yeah, I think that stands to reason. I just went above Shirley's head here, and I just noticed that there was a comment again from Martin. Can you quantify how certain you are that Madeleine died in the apartment, and what's your margin of doubt on that?
Okay, I'm certain that Madeleine died. Precisely where, I lean to the apartment because of what Jerry said. I don't have a good grip on the timeline, just from the statements themselves. I think Portuguese police do. I think they knew, and it wasn't something that they struggled with. So, good question, and Martin, I apologize for not having a better answer for you, though.
Okay, do you have any more there, Shirley? I just happened to glance at that one. I'm not very good at the comments. Shirley is great.
Yeah, they're still coming, but so in the meantime, I can ask some of one of the questions, and this is kind of away from the McCann. Well, let's stay with the McCann stuff for right now, and then we'll do the other stuff. Peter, why do you think the British authorities are completely reluctant even to consider the McCanns were involved in their daughter's death?
I think simply because making a statement early on, they do not want to back away and look foolish. Also, they depending on how media carries, remember, media is more about propaganda now than it is about news, and it has been for years. And if media has a favorable view towards someone, you're likely to hear the politicians have a favorite view, or officials have a favored view towards them. If media portrays something suspiciously, you're likely to hear the politicians or the officials follow suit. So there's some debate on whether this goes on from celebrities to media to politicians, that sort of thing, or it comes directly from media, but it flows the same. So they're opportunistic, and they don't want to go against the whatever tide is popular.
Also, I've always felt that maybe there's an issue where if somebody has already believed something, that it's very difficult for them to admit to being wrong, and so are very defensive and use every method to still proclaim they were right. In the abduction, I mean, that was his use of the abduction theory right from the very start. Surely that was what he really, it was a mantra. And I think a lot of people believed it because of that.
When Michael spoke earlier, he asked a very pointed question, or made a very strong assertion in terms of what to look for in the language. We listen, and what we do and Michael's been doing it for years, and we meet once a month. What we do is we look at a statement word by word, and we ask questions. Why might this have been used? Why this word? Why not another word? Rather than drawing an opinion, for the very reason that you just said, it's easy to fall in love with our own opinion. So by only asking questions, by only posing questions, we're not only being protective of the integrity of the statement analysis itself, but we're keeping our own opinions somewhat muted. So it's a very important way of looking at things. Remember, the McCanns had to talk me out of innocence. They overwhelmed me.
Okay. There was something you mentioned earlier that you really like to have somebody question something of what you do and what your thoughts are Is there anybody that has any of those kind of questions that you can put to Peter if you question how his statements that you may disagree with?
I think the question about the autistic children was great. That's a challenge. That's really good.
Yeah.
If the science can't stand scrutiny, toss it.
Yeah, I think that's important in all respects. You know, when there's a fact, if somebody questions it, it's important to question it. Important. So, Anna, do you think that Gonzalo Amaral was on the money right from the start and that he was constructively discredited? Again, this is a lot to do with the investigation, but you may have some thoughts on it.
I'm not familiar with it. I know the general discreditation that took place by the McCanns, but it was never done in a way that said, no, you're wrong. Madeleine's alive. You've got to find her.
Yeah. So what were the other things that you were holding back on, Shirley? Some more general questions.
Okay. Peter, this is from Tim Foster. Peter, how do you feel? Oh, sorry, I need to expand my spreadsheet. I can't read all that. You just throw these things at me and then I have to pretend like I'm prepared, but I'm not. So,
sorry. Can somebody please ask, tell us about a case that you were wrong?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's actually on the list. So, hello, Peter. How do you feel? This is from Tim Foster. How do you feel about lie spotting, duping delight, asymmetrical contempt, etc.? Cheers, Peter.
Could you say that again? I'm reading a different screen here.
Oh, sorry. How do you feel about lie spotting, duping delight, and asymmetrical contempt?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, yeah. I think we're getting more into body language there as opposed to statement analysis.
Yeah.
So do you, I guess that leads me a question for me. Do you ever work with people that do nonverbal analysis of statements?
Everyone does it. We do it to survive. We do have some on the team that are quite good at it, but there are so many variables, and there are certain things that are very common. But one of the things that was popular and now is no longer popular, but micro expressions. If you watch a slow motion video, very slow motion video, you can see the same face expressions that go by in a micro flash. And then there are people who claim that they can discern lies from not from a video but live, and it's not true. The science of it is fascinating, but the ability to train people in it has not proven success anywhere that I'm aware of. And I've talked to analysts all over the country here, at least, about this. And even those that have taken training, it becomes meaningless. The expression goes by so fast that you don't see it unless you're using a stop motion camera, that type of thing. But eventually, the founder of it, Paul Ekman, he had sent a email to everybody, all his followers, that he would not be weighing in an opinion watching someone's video. He'd only do it if he asked the questions. And so in effect, what he's saying is, I don't have confidence in my system, therefore I'm not going to do it myself. Whereas here, if I take a statement and Michael in Europe takes a statement, and someone in California and someone in Canada and someone in South Africa, we all take the same statement, we should come to the same basic conclusion, truth or deception. Now, there may be degrees of depth, but we all should come to the same conclusion. It's a science. It doesn't, you have to be present for it. You don't have to, you have to learn it. It takes time, but you have to learn it. And it's something that is fairly easy to teach. It's, sometimes I get emails, and Heather, my wife, screens them for me for the most part, but dear Peter, I saw the Madeleine McCann interview. You're the greatest thing since sliced bread. I want to learn how to do that. After I take your course, how much money will I make? some of the emails we don't even answer like that, or because you expect someone to do some research and look into it ahead of time. But those who get eaten up by it, those who can't stop reading about it, they do very well. They get addicted. And I warned them. I said, this stuff is addictive. It's very rewarding. And they take time to learn. So we offer courses for them. Some people will say, I want to start with the advanced course. And it won't make any sense to them. They'll be so angry that they paid for it, so I don't sell it. They've got to go through the first course to learn this, and then they have to practice. So let's say I was teaching you how to play the piano. I like to think of myself as a great pianist. Now, I don't know how to play the piano, but I like to think of myself. That's how deceptive people use that all the time. But they learn the notes, all the notes on the piano, all the chords on the guitar. I can do that. You're not going to be Eric Clapton tomorrow on the guitar. That's not how it works. It takes a lot of practice. So the McCann analysis, it isn't rocket science. It wasn't terribly difficult. It's something that anyone that takes a course seriously 6 to 12 months later, they're going to do very well on it like that. But it wasn't terribly challenging. When someone sends an anonymous threatening letter and we can identify who sent it, that's challenging. That's very exciting. But the basic analysis comes just with time. It takes just time to learn, to listen, what words to key in on, and then later how to explain it.
And there's a lot more involved than just going through the course. From what I understand, which I think is in the last little video to sign out with, is that you follow up for a year. If somebody's on a course, you follow up.
Yeah, it comes with a year support, e-support, where I email directly back and forth with them to help them learn. A lot of people go beyond that year. There are some who take the course and 3 months later, they have a certificate saying they completed the course. And I try to slow them down. That's one of the reasons I encourage for the year. And people that go beyond a year do even better, because rushing through it doesn't help. It's a skill to be acquired and then applied anywhere. I mean, you can use it literally in the stock market. I was asked to analyze an annual statement written by a CEO who had just spent a fortune buying inside stock in her own company. And she was deceptive. And they didn't get it was a cable company. They didn't get the contracts in the Midwest, and the stock went down to nothing, that sort of thing. So it's really helpful like that. But it's also for discernment. People today are so controlled by fear that they're giving up their freedoms all throughout the world, or at least the Western world. And you can see how societies are overrun by this, especially the use of fear. I mean, people that have talked about saying they haven't hugged their loved ones in a year because some politician told you so, or they can see Anthony Fauci's lying, but it was for our own good. What type of critical thinking is that? We need to be able to ask questions, including of the analysis. Punch holes in it. What remains will be a good product, but go after it. Go after it with some ferocity.
Okay, I was inspired to ask you a question, but I'm going to use Eric, who has asked the same question, and that is, what case have you got wrong? Have you got any cases wrong? Eric wants to know, and so do I, and I'm not sure that I'm going to hear the answer that I'm thinking.
There was a case of a missing little girl, and the father was deceptive. And the little girl ended up being murdered by a sex offender. And I didn't know what to think because the analysis is wrong. He didn't do it. And I had said, he's deceptive, he's lying. So I was wrong, and this is a very valuable lesson. He was deceptive. He was passed out from drugs on the couch when the little girl went for a stroll by herself. It was neglect, but not murder. And that was a very valuable and difficult lesson for me, that when I conclude deception, the context has to be so strong that I conclude deception that's not attendant. We have cases where we call them attendant crimes or tangent crimes took place. So maybe they didn't do what we're looking for, but they did something else. And so I will at times conclude this person is deceptive, but I'm not sure if it's this or this. So that was a very painful but very valuable lesson. Heather says that's what's so right about me.
You've done what, close to 3,000?
That was funny.
You've done close to 3,000. I don't know whether they're cases or whether it's corporate stuff, but and it's been 20 years you've been doing this?
No, I started the casual reading part after being deceived for the last time. I think that was 1999. And then it went from there, but just about 20 years, yeah.
So you're a real expert, absolutely. I'll tell you, I am fascinated. What you've been saying today just really has, I've learnt quite a few things, you know, overall, there is so much that I will never be able to understand myself, obviously, without training. But there's a few things you've pointed out there that I thought, wow, you know, that is just amazing what you do. What
people bring to the training is invaluable. For example, Michael's background will be different from someone else's background. The latest article up on the blog is very deep analysis by Luke. Luke has an engineer's background. He does things that I don't understand what he's even saying. When he talks about the being up in a helicopter and measuring something or other. What? That's crazy. I don't have that. Everyone that comes has a background that can be useful. And so when we get together as a team, I think there were about 24 of us this past Thursday, and it was brilliant. Everyone brings their gifts and talents in. And then like iron sharpening iron, we get to the truth. What I miss, someone else gets. What I might project, like the example of the young woman that was getting me emotionally upset, I was raised with 7 older sisters. So there's going to be an emotional influence like that upon me where someone else wasn't. And someone else has a different perspective. When I have a difficult time sometimes with the language of addiction because it's really great for an employer to avoid the trouble of hiring someone who's active in their addiction. But the past year I've been asking, what can I do to help addicts recover? Because showing them that they're deceptive doesn't seem to go too well with them. So I'm a little bit lost with that and looking for answers and looking for some satisfaction of helping. It's wonderful when someone comes and it's a cold case and we're able to solve the cold case and justice is realized. Do I have time for one more example like that?
Of course. Okay. So, we have no time limit.
All right. I was in, I'm getting tired. When I was teaching one time, law enforcement, it was about 50 officers, I think, and these were seasoned detectives. And it was a several-day training, and I think this was day 2. Day 1 had gone really well. These professionals were really great, and with all their experience investigating, they brought so much to that training that I love the challenge. One of the things I like to do, it's maybe a little bit of self-loathing or something, but I like to go into it to pull out a statement that I've never seen before and then analyze it on the fly, analyze it live. I try to do that every month whenever I can with the team. I have to lead the team, but it's a statement I've never seen and I don't know the background, don't know anything about it. That's very exciting. It pushes me to learn. Well, in this particular case, it was more of a setting where I was laying a foundation And during the break of the second day, I think it was, a cold case investigator said, "Hey, would you take a look at this 911 call?" I said, "Sure, I'll do it when I get back to Maine." And he said, "Oh, can you do it now?" And I said, "No." He said, "It's only about a 2-minute phone call." I said, "That's about 6 hours of work. You know, we have to cover a lot of this material." And as we were talking, the captain said, "Hey, Peter, I think you should do it now." And I said, well, Captain, I really think we need to cover X, Y, and Z. And I wanted to stay with it because it was going so well at that point. And a little bit of a crowd began to gather. And my cold case detective was handing out the transcript to people. And he had a big stack of evidence, photographic evidence of a murder-suicide. So I said, "No, I don't think it's best to do it right now." And then I heard this little squeaky voice in the background go, "Yeah, do it now." And it was Heather. So I gave her one of those looks that only a husband can give. And she did not back down. And the captain politely reminded me who was paying me. So I said, "Oh, we'll do it now." And all it was an emergency call, 999 or 911 call, where a man came home and found his girlfriend and 6-year-old son dead. And apparently it was a murder-suicide. And so we're going to do the 911 call live, and I'm going to take them through it. And it took all day. But when we finished, the captain asked what my conclusion was. And I said, the caller killed them both. And I had a sense of the motive, because one of the things he said was, 2 people just killed themselves in my house. Generally speaking, you will not take ownership of a house while there's dead bodies in there. It's the house, not my house. He was taking ownership, and that really puzzled me. So the captain said, "Well, how sure are you?" And dopey me said, "I'll stake my career on it," which is not the wisest thing to say. But I was tired, and I began with the premise that this guy didn't do it, and he talked me out of it thoroughly. So the cold case detective said, "All right, some details. The person you're calling the suspect, the caller, passed his polygraph. You still think he did it?" I said, "He did it." And I have a lot of respect for the polygraph. And they had the forensics matched up the murder-suicide. The coroner was satisfied with the conclusion. He was cooperative. The caller was cooperative with the case, and the case is closed. And the district attorney refuses to reopen the case based on my suspicion, but the district attorney will open the case if you can write to the coroner and get him to change the determination from homicide to undetermined homicide. So I said, "Oh, I'll write a report." And I got back home to Maine and put my notes together and did a very brief, easy to understand explanation. Short, believe it or not. And the coroner said, "Hey, that makes sense." And he reopened the case. He sent it to the district attorney. The district attorney said, "Okay, if he opened his, I'll open mine." And so we opened the case, and the cold case detective eventually took it to court, and the jury took about 30 minutes to deliberate and came back with a guilty verdict. They also had him on a recording, a jailhouse recording, where his son, a lawyer, said to him, "Dad, you're not going to talk your way out of this one. 2 people just killed themselves in my house. 2 people killed themselves." He was blaming the 6-year-old boy in his verbalized perception of reality. And why would he take ownership of a house where there's dead people in there? As it turned out, it wasn't his house. He was grifting. He went from woman to woman and always tried to get them to sign over the title deed of their house to him, or at least add him to the title. When this particular woman didn't, he had said, "I will never be homeless again." Her refusal to sign him onto the title deed of her house was like her signing her death warrant. And so he had killed her. This was very rewarding in terms of this cold case investigator who had the victim's mother come up to him and hug him, elderly woman, asking him if she could clean his house, because she cleans houses to survive, elderly woman. She said, people have been taunting me for years saying my daughter was a killer, killing my grandson, and I knew my daughter didn't do it, and you proved it. So the reward is so high. Now, we never get credit for it. The team takes no credit, and we don't want any credit because it's on the ground investigators that do the work. We just give them the analysis. They're the ones that have to prove it in court. Now, I can testify, but most of it has to be done through them.
Yeah.
The emotional reward is so powerful of finding justice for someone like that. It makes it all worth it.
Yeah, and that's one thing I wanted to ask you before, although I said we have no time limit. I usually like to keep it for about 2 hours because obviously you've been doing all the work here. But what I did want to ask you was, apart from that, maybe, what is this one case that you feel really proud of, more so than all the others? Something that you really felt you'd achieved more, more than the others? I'm sure all of them you feel proud of, but does one case stand out?
I think the one I just described is a standout one that we can talk about because of the conclusion. There's others where they haven't been adjudicated. So I'm very careful because what I say can be used by defense attorneys or attempt to exploit by defense attorneys. But for some of those cases that haven't been adjudicated, being able to speak to the family and give them answers that they knew in their hearts, they knew, but to give them the answer, then show them how I came to that conclusion, just as easily as with the McCann case. They get some measure, I won't say peace, but of an opportunity to heal. Because the parents of missing children or murdered children, they blame themselves forever. What I mean by that is one young woman, college-age woman, had been murdered, and I interviewed her father, who blamed himself because 10 years or something earlier, he had moved from one state to another, taking a job, and if he hadn't taken that job, she'd still be alive today. That's what innocent parents sound like. Very much unlike the McCanns.
Yeah.
Who do nothing but attack.
And defend. Yeah.
So that kind of leads to the question that I just put up there from Helen Happy Thoughts. She asked what you think of one of them are likely to crack and tell the truth, and if one of them were to crack, who would most likely it be?
I don't know. I am surprised they haven't divorced. They may not be able to because they are tied within the deception. But that is like a cancer that eats away at people. It may lend a little bit of credibility to my friend's belief that that one of them sociopathic-like. I'm not saying sociopath, but sociopathic-like. Kate, normally I would say the woman, but she's hard. She's hard and hardened over time. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a question that we all hope that one day will be answered. In fact, as the Portuguese police have stated, there's really only two things that are going to be able to solve this case, and that's to either find the body or have a confession of some sort.
I think the latter.
There's been a lot of questions around that, just the basic question encompassed into what do you think? I mean, if you feel comfortable sharing what your prediction might be, if it's ever going to be solved.
I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully as the hormonal strength of especially Kate begins to decline, that's a bill that's got to come due. Either that or she's just seared her conscience so much so by telling herself that she did it for the other two. I know it's not a popular view, but I don't think that Madeleine was killed deliberately. I think it was indeed an accident and probably something to do
I
with.
think most of us believe that, Peter.
Okay,
That
I know
it's
some
an
people
accident.
don't. I tell you what, I've had some great over the years, some great comments on like the videos or Facebook or something, or emails that have made me think. With a lot of people that have been paying attention to this case very carefully.
So one day we may find out. I feel positive that something will happen. At some point, there will be something. And I keep that positive thought because after 13 years, or nearly 14, why am I still here if I don't believe that something will happen? And
There wouldn't be interest in this case after 14 years if it had not been for the McCanns' arrogance.
yeah,
They made people angry. They filled the people with resolve that want the truth.
yeah, and we do.
They have no one to
And
blame but themselves.
yeah, well, I feel sure that it's going to happen. And so there's other issues. Gonzalo thinks it is, but he thinks it's more a political thing, and he knows more than me. But Peter, I am so happy you were able to join us this week. As I told you before, there are so many people that were excited about having you on here. One of them actually was Pat Brown. Pat was on with us last week, and you got a big thumbs up from her. She really is a big fan of you. In fact, I just want to take a moment to mention that she is now going to be doing her own lives on and maybe next Sunday she may start. So we can look forward to that. But I'll give you information on that later. So is there anything else that you feel you wanted to say, or you wanted to explain and give details about for anybody who wanted to take a course with you?
Sure. For them to consider that it's a life obtaining skill. It's something that enhances their life and something they can use in different ways. We have a brilliant, Chris Woodruff is a brilliant analyst in the UK, and he has done some amazing work, even in the insurance business. So it's not just for law enforcement. There's employment analysis, which is a form of advanced analysis. There's general discernment, which is very strong. And there's a certain reward of being able to see through some deception and learn to pinpoint it in life itself. It can be a good self-protection, especially in a world where it's become more common, but worse, more accepted.
And I think in the general sense, even the very basics of what you've been talking about today, we can gain from that. As I say, there's a few things that came up there that I'm thinking, wow, I'll certainly be looking for that in the future, which I hadn't thought of before. Never mind.
I'm sorry. Here's an example of a personal application. Several years ago, I ended up in the ER under the care of a cardiologist. And basically I was done. And I knew that, and in a way he did too, but he was fascinated by what I did for a living. So he was asking a lot of questions, spent a lot of time with me, quite unlike what you might expect. And at the end, he said, I'm going to give you some advice, but I don't want you to ever use my name, and I never have. It goes against everything that I learned in medical school, everything I did in my practice, everything I've told people. And he had my attention because he was in his early 70s and he was in great shape. He said, I'd like you to go eat some butter. And, we kind of chuckled about it, but I knew what he meant. He wanted me to look into, with these skills, what our diets are like. And so I had been taught, of course, to eat margarine and no saturated fats and lots of this and that, and the food pyramid. But basically, what he was saying to me, at least for Americans to know, the food pyramid is the official government recommendation of how we should be eating, which I think is the only, or at least the first time politicians in the history that I can see told the public how to eat. And what he was saying was, you see the food pyramid, do the opposite of what the government says. Do the opposite. So I ate fat and lost a lot of fat. And then I had blood pressure issues. So I did the opposite. I ate a ton of salt, and that resolved. And, one after the next, until I regained health and continue in the health today. He knew where to point the direction. He was afraid to say it publicly because, you get in trouble, and doctors do. And they sound sometimes like conspiracy theorists, but they are professionals who are helping people. These are honorable men and women in healthcare that are doing great things. And they're also the ones that have been against the quarantining of the healthy and the unsanitary unhealthiness of masks and everything else. But he set me off on a journey years ago that has spread to my family. And then I end up meeting many other people that have taken the same journey themselves, and that their health has rebounded tremendously because of it. That was be able to see the deception of Ansel Keys and the lipid hypothesis and the marketing of tobacco, and no different than processed foods with sugar, and the marketing and the deception there, and the deception everywhere has brought me health, being able to discern that. I regret having all the many years that I blindly followed advice of the quote unquote professionals, but better late than never. So, example of stock market investing, when the market crashed under COVID last March, I was in Arizona teaching a seminar, and it was law enforcement, and they were upset because some of them were very close to retirement, and their jobs are really tough. Their bodies wear out like crazy. And some of them, their portfolio was down by 30%. Their retirement was cut in a third off of it. And they were frightened. So I asked, and this is something that's pretty risky to do, but I asked the videographer to turn off the live feed. And I said, I'd just like to share this with you, and then we'll get back to the training. I said, your retirement accounts are decimated, and people are panicking, and stores are running out of supplies, and basically the media is declaring Armageddon is upon us. This is the end. Everything is terrible. I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to borrow money from whoever lent me money. I'm going to buy stock. Do the opposite. Do the opposite. And it worked out very nicely, up about 70% from that fall part. And any of them that followed can take heart that it was Peter Lynch said this back in the 80s. The day after the world ends, people are going to get up and put their pants on one leg at a time, and they're going to go back to work. So this madness that we're in today, it's going to end. How much more of our freedoms will people be willing to give up? How we became a people that were willing to look at our neighbors and say, oh, that's a deplorable, or that's a non-essential. We allowed elites to divide us. And I think it's going to run its course. I think things will get better, but it will take time. It's just good to discern that. And when you're thinking about a policy, because I have a love-hate relationship with politicians. I love them because they give me great examples to use in teaching. They're always accepted.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Is to ask yourself, will this proposal or law, will it limit more of my freedom and give it to them? Because human nature being what it is, they're not going to cough it up. They're not going to give it back very easily. So the more people that rule over me, the worse. And that's like a really interesting political position to take. It's like, well, will it hinder my freedom? And then you have people today saying, well, you should give up your freedom. And the people that can afford to stay home and not work, they're the ones barking the loudest. where other people have no choice. They have to go to work. So being able to discern what some of the politicians propose at different times, does it serve them or does it serve us, the people? It's a really important distinction. So training can help an awful lot there.
Yeah, and inspiration from people like you is so important. I think all of us can choose to complain, or we can choose to look and think for ourselves and listen to other people. Sometimes take their advice, sometimes recognize it's not the best of advice, but it is important to think for yourself. And the knowledge of something you do really helps in that. So I think, yeah, you've got a lot of people loving what you're saying. So many comments on that, but I think you've probably come to the end of a need a rest. You mentioned that half an hour ago, and you're still here. So unless there's anything else that you wanted to mention, I think we'll... Pardon?
I have one question for the audience.
Absolutely.
How come no one has asked me about baseball?
I can answer that question, but I don't know.
Things will get better. Things will look up.
Is there a baseball game on, or have I? Has it gone over my head?
No, I'm a pretend baseball player. It's my new second life.
Oh, is it? Oh,
after I didn't die, I played baseball again.
Oh, okay. And you do that, Shirley? Stop laughing at me. Sometimes I get clueless. I think this is one of those moments.
It's like where the deception detection may have hurt me was it gave me back my health. And then I foolishly played ice hockey and baseball against people half my age and ended up in surgery.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So really quick, let me see if I can find it. I can't really find it, but one of the mods asked, now that you're kind of talking about not as serious stuff, about, so your kids as teenagers, she made a comment about how they probably really hated your job, and did they get away with very much?
Actually, they had a lot of fun with it because they used to have their friends test me. So they bring their buddies over, and the buddies would talk, and I'd ask them questions, and they're like, look how good my dad is at this. So it was kind of fun. When people are honest with each other, it works very well. It just works better.
Right.
To express oneself, it helps to process. I've done a lot of work with adult victims of early childhood sexual abuse, and being able to see some results is so rewarding. It's hard to describe. Maybe that's the most rewarding of it all. There was an author in the Roaring '20s in America who was a smashing success, made lots of money, and he raised a family, and he reached a point in his life with his wife that he thought life couldn't get any better. His kids were grown and launched, and everyone was doing well. And his wife left him for another woman. He was devastated. He was humiliated beyond. And he decided to commit suicide. So he went up to his cabin in upstate New York on a Friday, and the suicide was planned for Sunday, because what he was going to do between Friday and Sunday was write letters to his children about his life, letting them know it wasn't their fault. And so as he recounted his life in journaling, starting on Friday night, by Sunday evening, he no longer wanted to commit suicide. Some of the adult victims of early childhood sexual abuse, some of them suffered abuse before speech. So there is no articulation they have to express what's going on. There's no words. It was before speech. And the body knows the trauma, and it ends up being compromised immune systems, mental health issues, but eventually they seem like they do okay. They get a little older and they get they get past the terrible teens and they do okay. But eventually they get older, and as natural strength declines, that bill comes due and they get hit really hard with it. And I have been able to help quite a number just by journaling, just by processing those horrible thoughts and processing the emotions and things that they've been through to the point where they get bored of it, which is the greatest thing. The sting is gone, or at least mitigated. So that's another one of those uses that they actually do self-analysis, where they write out, for example, what happened on a particular day. And then they use the basic tools of statement analysis to go through it and gain insight into it. While they're doing all that, their brain is processing the trauma and they're moving forward. And I mean that literally, like in a chronological way. And their suffering is alleviated. It's really quite amazing. So perhaps that's maybe the most rewarding thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's into an area that is just so wide to deal with. There's so much. You deal with so much. It's, you know, we're focusing on Maddie. I can't even begin to think of, if you were doing a random interview, what you would focus on. There's so much that you deal with, and the interest. And I've noticed a lot of the comments, you have actually helped some people here today. Well, I've seen some of the comments, and that's really, yeah, that's really important to know. We will come to
your audience.
You have one, or you want to take this one?
No, I have one more for him. How many saw Tiger King?
Okay, go ahead.
And what do they think of Carol Baskin?
What? I'm sorry. What was the first question?
It's compound. How many of them that saw Tiger King, the documentary? What were their thoughts about Carol Baskin?
Oh, okay. I'll start putting the comments up on the screen when they come through.
And you're not going to answer it? I haven't seen it, so I can't.
I'm going to wait and see. No, because, you know, I want to give everybody else a chance to get their stuff out there.
Okay. In the meantime, I can't leave Carrie C. She's the one. She's been putting your links in the chat to your blog and everything else. Also, your book. You have a book, and I'm sorry I don't have it handy here right now. But what's your book called?
Wise as serpents, gentle as doves, discerning deception.
Okay, Carrie has put a link in the chat for that. So she's been working hard at that. So I can't ignore her comment here while Shirley is getting together some of the other ones about Tiger King. Do you ever turn off and not think about what everyone was saying and deciding if it's deceptive or not? that must be tough for you.
It is. I generally don't turn off. And what happens is when I go driving someplace, is if Heather's home, she follows me on an app and she'll call me because I'll get lost. And it seems very silly but it's very common for me to get lost in areas that I've been in for 20 years because I just get lost in thought. I don't get in accidents or cause trouble like that, but I'll miss a turn and I'll be analyzing in my head. So sports is, and I joke about, you know, baseball or hockey, but sports, there are so many things to do in life that we've been given that are joyful. And I encourage everyone, especially over the past year, to go play some silly love songs like Paul McCartney said, or get outside and have the healthy exchange of good bacteria with hugs, things that we grew up doing. But to see the joy in many things that are taking place, that's probably a good alleviation of the analyzing. And some of the analyzing is very pleasant, as I think on good things that people have said and done.
Yeah, and I have to me, I like to surround myself with happy. And you just mentioning there being about happy and what we're going through it's so important. If just to be positive, but that's me. Anyway, you've come up with some questions or some answers.
Yes, so far everybody thinks, well, she's a nutcase. She's guilty. That's pretty much what everybody has been saying.
And then he wants some homework.
Yeah, and then somebody wants you to give them. Yeah. So this was.
He's a great homework. I'll leave off Tiger King because if it does go to fruition, the case, then more information is going to come out. I don't know that she'll be charged in the death of her husband, and it has to be proven. But I believe she should be. And she didn't feed him to the tigers, I don't think either. Here's a homework, is find 5 headlines in any online news you want to read where it says so-and-so denied such and such. Then I'd like you to go into the article and find out if so-and-so really did deny it with the 3-pronged denial that we rely upon: the pronoun I, the past tense didn't or did not, and the specific allegation mentioned. And I think they will be amazed how many times someone avoids saying, I didn't steal the money. I didn't kill that guy. It's quite a shocking lesson. So try to get 5 headlines where it says subject denies so-and-so, and then look at the actual quotes and see how they'll use the word never instead of did not, or they'll change the allegation to something else, or they may even, like a teenager, drop that pronoun I. It's really quite fascinating.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, I think
thanks so much for that. I think, so many people are so interested in this, and obviously we can't cover everything today. Maybe one day you'll come back again. We can sort some questions, but it has been absolutely great to have you today, Peter.
I just want to say to everybody, I do apologize. I tried to get as many questions up as I could. I know that I still have a list of some that weren't answered, but yeah, I think that pretty much seals it, that you need to come back again, Peter, because we still have a lot of questions. But so the one up on the board is one that I've seen kind of in different variations a few times today. Peter, knowing what you know about your trade, could you fool the statement analysis if you had to? Which I think is something we all kind of want to know.
Yep. If I'm asked open-ended questions where I have to speak for myself, the answer is no. I will not fool anyone. And if I had to write it and could very carefully choose my words and edit my words, then maybe. But basically, if you get me speaking, you're going to catch me.
Okay. Well, what a life. Thank you, Peter. Everybody has loved you. We've loved you. And as Shirley said, maybe one day you'll come back. Hopefully in the not too distant future, we could put some questions together and I could give you a list to work on.
That'd be great.
Really appreciate what you've done for us today. And we've had a lot of input and it's all been good. So I don't think we had too many questions in you. I think most of us know that what you do is absolutely the best. So, somebody happy with their homework. Giving her Dixie. Oh my God. Yay, homework. Okay. Just like the old days, eh? So we'll bring it to a close now, if it's okay with you. And we'll sign out with just the ending, actually, to the Richard D. Hall video, which everybody, if it's absolutely from start to finish, it is just, I couldn't stop watching it. So prior to that, I want to thank Shirley, as well as Peter, of course. Thank Shirley and the mods who are here every week, just making sure the chat's good. Remembering Chris and Kim, and for everybody, we'll say good night for now. And once again, thank you, Peter. And you haven't answered about whether you'd come back, but we're going to keep our fingers crossed.
I'll come back if you ask me about baseball.
I'm gonna start making the list today. I'm gonna start making some baseball questions for you.
I'll bring my video.
Okay, and do I have to start watching baseball? I played rounders at school. I mean, that's the closest I've ever come to baseball. So I'll work on that, Peter. I'll maybe find a couple of my own. But anyway, thanks again. Really appreciate you joining us. Yeah.
Thanks, Shirley.
Thanks, Shirley. And thanks, everybody. So bye-bye for now. And stay safe. And
okay, all right then. And just if people watching this, Peter, want to get involved themselves and become statement analysts, what's your advice?
They must have formal training. As you've seen now through this, that the information on a blog is very short, without much explanation, and without the discipline of formal training, even very intelligent people will go astray. And so maybe they will hit 70% accuracy, but the 30% misses are going to discredit not only themselves, but the science. So we have courses that they take at home, but each course comes with 12 months of support. So they never submit an errant report. You always have someone looking at your work, correcting your work, and if they're wrong, we can go right back and say, here's where it went off.
Right.
And so you can correct it and follow the principles. It isn't, as it's made to seem through Hollywood or now through Facebook, there are no magic truth wizards. There are no people that are just born. And Dr. Paul Ekman had studied the micro expressions of people to show how they reveal their emotions by slowing down the video frame by frame. And what that led to was lots of people taking this training of trying to spot that. It doesn't translate into any success in investigations. If you ask me, as a matter of public record, Peter, your conclusion that the McCanns are showing guilty knowledge in the death of Madeleine, how sure are you of that? I am able to answer that knowing that my career is looked at and say, I'm certain.
Okay. All right, and Peter, well, I'd just like to thank you very much indeed, and it's been a pleasure to have met you. Thank you.
Thank you.